He taught filmmakers as entertainers. I think with a director who has proven to be very able and very skillful in telling great stories, working with talented crew members, also arranging them around them, finding the right people to work with, and having a quite diverse career, first starting in Europe, moving on to Hollywood, and making films that at least I grew up with in the late 80s and early 90s, and after that as well. Please welcome on stage for the session, Following Your Instincts, Dutch-American director Paul Verhoeven.
Thank you.
Paul, we're going to have a session in which we're not only going to talk about your experience as a filmmaker and about your American films. I think many of the filmmakers here in the audience, like me, have also grown up with the films that you made and spent our evenings in the cinema watching RoboCop and Basic Instinct and Total Recall. We're also going to have a session in which many people can ask you questions as well. We're very glad that you joined us to come here today. Maybe to start with the fact that you, well, you worked for quite a while in Hollywood, but before that, you worked actually for a long time in Europe, in the Netherlands. And you had a quite extensive career there already, making films. One of them was even Oscar nominated, Turkish Delight in '73. Can you maybe say something about the time, how you started as a filmmaker? What was basically how did you become a filmmaker? When did you decide to become a filmmaker?
Well, that's a decision I'm not so sure that I really made that. You know, the circumstances are sometimes so important. But in fact, I'm a trained mathematician. And so I went to university as to become a professor or whatever in mathematics. And I finished that, in fact, on request of my father. And then, as I was trying to do this mathematics stuff, I realized that I was not very creative. I could do the exams, but I couldn't really think in mathematics in a creative way. And I think I want to express myself in some way, so I tried painting, I tried other things. Ultimately, I started to make very short movies, and from one short movie went to the other. In fact, the breakthrough came when I was drafted for the military. So I own everything to the military. That's the Dutch Navy in this case and the Dutch Marines. And it was during that period that instead of being, in fact they wanted to send me to Germany to be a mathematician and find out about the curves of the rockets that had to be sent to Moscow, yeah? And then by talking to people, I got myself out of that and moved myself into the film department of the Navy. And so that's where my career started, because that was kind of professional, and they worked in color and all that stuff, you know, so it was, and with sound, which I hadn't nearly not done yet. And the breakthrough was really a film, a propaganda film, not so different from Triumph of the Will, probably, that I did for the Marines, 20-minute documentary about how wonderful the Dutch Marines were. I mean, you have heard about them, I suppose. And that was noticed by other people, producers, and that led to television. So I did a television series called Flores, which was medieval, where I discovered a young actor that you might know. I've seen probably in many films, which is Rutger Hauer. And so he was my hero and my main actor at that time in Flores. That took 2 years, and from there on it was then, I would say, nearly smooth sailing to making features. And I did first a comedy, and then I started to, I mean, everything was then very successful, so I was very lucky. I was very lucky that this career went into a direction that I would probably not have thought about that it was possible, but then it happened.
You made quite some films in the Netherlands, as said, that won quite some awards. One of them, Turkish Delight, 73, a while ago, but still a very strong film. Also a discovery, actually, of quite some talents and actors that you worked with. I want to talk about that later, how you have to seem to have an eye for discovering actors as well. It was nominated for the Oscars in 73, but it took, I think, another 12 years before you really moved to Hollywood, which was in the mid-80s.
Right.
Did you, having an Oscar nomination for this strong film, did you feel that you wanted to move further than Europe and go to America, or was it
Not
kind
really.
of a coincidence as well?
Not really, no. I mean, it was more that the circumstances in Holland in the 80s started to change. I mean, all these movies in Holland are made, of course, with subsidies of the government. You know, otherwise it's too expensive for producers. So you get 40, 50, 60% you get from the government money for the budget. And the committees that give you the money, and I'm sure you know all about committees, but this is one of them that became more and more political. And then, I mean, left-wing political, which in this case nearly is equal to leftist fascism. And it became much more difficult to get movies to get money for normal movies. It had to be culturally relevant, or in whatever, or intellectually relevant, sociologically relevant, and that's not how I was thinking about movie making. And so they started to refuse me money, although the movies I had made were extremely successful, and the most successful, in fact, ever made in Holland. That was not something you could use as a bonus, you know. That would not help you at all. The fact that it was successful meant it was not good, culturally, intellectually, artistically, sociologically. And so it became impossible to get money. And there were always, let's say, phone calls from the United States to come over. And finally, my wife said, we should go. I wouldn't have thought that, you know. Because I was very happy with my crew and my cast and the actors and actresses I knew, and I could express myself in the right way, but having no money I mean, film is of course so much economics and art, yeah, and you cannot just separate it. And if you don't get the money, you cannot shoot, you know. It's not like a painter, you need a canvas and some stuff and you can work. With a film, it's impossible. So she pushed me over the ocean. She said, we should go, I'll take care of the kids. You do a film that was offered to me, which was RoboCop, and we'll see how it goes.
And your crew actually partly followed you, because they partly also work in Hollywood.
Only one person, a German cinematographer, Joost Vacano, who had done already 2 movies with me in Holland. And the only person that in the United States that I knew from the crew or the cast was Joost Vacano, because I brought him in. And because I felt that I needed somebody to support me, that I would know, that I could be sure that he would do it in the right way, that I had already so many problems with the language and the culture and everything. It's such a transition, you know. And so I felt I needed help, and that was then Joost. And then for the rest, it was all new people. So you go into a world you don't know. Sometimes I didn't even know what the dialogue meant in the script. I made terrible mistakes. I thought when somebody would say, come on, brother, that I wrote in my script, where is it basically proof that these are brothers, you know?
Let's maybe watch a famous clip from RoboCop, in which actually RoboCop is being resurrected after Murphy is killed. Let's have a look.
Thank you.
Well, we know what RoboCop looked like afterwards. He's being introduced actually after this scene. You just referred already to working with many new people in your crew as well. That include also the screenwriters who you did not work with before. How did you work with them together? Was it a complete script that you got? Did you have an influence on that script? Did you change things?
Yeah, yeah, well, no, I got the complete script. It was a second draft. And then coming from Europe, I felt that should at least have some promiscuity. So I said that there should be an affair between Peter Weller and Nancy Allen before he dies. Then, of course, they did that. They thought as I was the director now, that they should do what they said. And then I read that and realized it was so out of touch with American culture, that it was so European and so me, or whatever you want to call it. And that so that was really the most important part of my education in the United States, was to go with the flow. And so I said, forget about this draft, let's go back to the second one and let's shoot that. So it's certainly something that you have to let happen, you know, that you are not trying too much to do it your way. And I think going with the flow is probably the most important advice somebody ever gave me about the United States. Don't try your own stuff when you get there, you know. Try to be American with the Americans and follow them, and forget your European education. I think there is still a lot of European kind of thinking in the film, but it is more, it's all filtered through an American lens.
Now, if you compare, for example, the films that you made before moving to Hollywood, and the films, Robocop being the first one, I mean, you see there is a difference in style, so what you just said, I mean, you can see that in your films as well, but at the same time, I think you have made films that kind of were new as well to the film landscape as it was then, and it did influence, in a way, a whole generation of filmmakers as well, because you tried out new things. So how did that work? I mean, you have influenced also the people that you work with.
Yeah, but it's not something like that you say it has to be this way, I want that, because that doesn't work. But if you start to work with the scriptwriter at Newmeyer and Michael Miner, at Newmeyer later did with me Starship Troopers, then there is a cooperation, and of course you have, I put my ideas on the table, and often these ideas at that time were very wrong, I would say, because I was relying on European and Dutch culture, and it didn't apply to, certainly not to their thinking. So, but that doesn't mean that you are not doing something with the scriptwriter. I added scenes, and when they were good, they just used them, you know. So you cannot say that you are, I mean, I would never have invented Robocop, let's put it that way. I mean, I could do it, and I could do it in a kind of probably original way. I think one of the things that was new to them is to try, or not to use, let's say, transitions between the news media. There are continuously parts of the news in the television. And normally you see that in a movie, the cops would be passing by and they would see it and this and that, and they would go into the screen and all that. I tried, what I decided is to really make harsh cuts. So this is the story of Robocop, and bang, there is the news. And then, whoop, that's the story of Robocop. And I based it really, in my head, I based that on the painter Mondrian. Because that's, I don't know if you know his abstract paintings, but they're all, let's say, colored squares, blue, or green, or whatever. And then there are black lines like this, through the painting, yeah? I mean, separation. And I'm a big fan of painting. And so I knew that I had that in my head, and I applied it to the movie. I thought, okay, no transitions there, not a smooth transition, bang. And then the stops, bang. It was even so radical that there was a film critic of the Los Angeles Times. Basically, in halfway the movie, there's a commercial, but you don't know it's a commercial. It's about a Tyrannosaurus, two dinosaurs, a dinosaur, isn't it? And it's a little, they're so big, and then you have the car, but the car is even bigger than the. It's promotional for a car, and so a commercial for a car, and that is in the middle of the Robocop story, and boom, it changes to a dinosaur. And the critic, this was as I said, this critic from the LA Times, went to, it was a special screening for her, she went to the cabin where you project and said, you put in the wrong reel. So it was really radical to do it so brusque, yeah, so completely harsh.
Moving back to the scene that we just saw, I mean, there's a lot of new and it looks. I mean, this is a film of '87, when I remember it
sure.
right. So, but with the scenes and how you basically introduced the character of RoboCop, you just mentioned that you worked with Jos Vacano also in this film. How did you work with him? Did you try out things? Was this all in the script already, or did you really work with him on that as well?
Well, I made storyboards, and then we discussed the storyboards. A lot of these things, I mean, all these point of view that are so very low there, yeah? I mean, the camera's like this, looking up all the time in this, what you just saw. I mean, that was, Joost basically came up with that idea to do it that way. And he said, well, if we I'll put this very small, this was shot without sound, in fact. There was a guide track, but there was no sound. So we put a little RE that makes a lot of noise, so you cannot use it very well. Very low on a chair or whatever, and then have all the actors around it and then play it on the camera, kind of. And he came up with that idea, and I think that was that's. If you hear an idea like that on the set, in fact, it happened when we were basically starting the scene, and you suddenly think that's a good idea, and go for it. That is what cooperation and collaboration is really about, isn't it? That people come, that you have, let's say, crew members that come up with ideas that are really relevant. And then you have to see that and not say, oh, I had this in mind, I'm going to do that. That you can then at the last moment say, we won't do that, we're going to do this. So, that's how it was done. Maybe you asked something else, what was that?
No, it's about that collaboration, I think.
Right.
What we can do, Paul, let's maybe show a couple of other clips of your films, like talk about it briefly, and come up also back again to the point of collaboration. When we move to the film that you made after that, which is Total Recall, actually recently there was a remake even of Total Recall, which is quite an honor as a director to have a remake made. Well,
yesterday I said it feels like you're already dead.
Okay.
In fact, it's worse because the three of my movies I said they did already Total Recall. They just finished shooting RoboCop, and they also going to do Starship Troopers. At least they bought the rights to do that.
And they made musicals about
and
films.
And then in Holland, there's three of my movies were made to a musical, yes. So, I mean, talking about entertainment, yeah?
Let's move to, let's watch a scene from Total Recall. We're going to watch a scene in which Arnold Schwarzenegger that you worked with, come back to that, and also Sharon Stone you worked with already in this film.
A little bit, a lot, yeah. She's already pretty present there, yeah.
She's very present. We're going to see that in the clip and I'm going to talk about it. Total Recall.
Thank you.
As said, Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is a film from 1990. Sharon Stone, both very present in the film indeed. But at that time, not very present still already in the film industry. You basically, I mean, Schwarzenegger did Terminator before.
Right.
But this was actually the film that he really got a little bit more presence, also a little bit more benefit from this film.
I think they mismanaged the release of Terminator, because they thought it was not an important movie enough or whatever. And Terminator, of course, was breaking new ground. You know, if there's two films that basically set up science fiction again as a genre, it would be Star Wars and Terminator. And but I profited from that because the same company did this, and then they realized their mistake, so they put a lot of more publicity and money into the release of the movie, which was great, helped me a lot. But it's difficult that these things are so influenced by money, of course, and in this case, let's say release money to support the movie, isn't it? Yeah, the budget are extremely high there. So, I mean, without that, you cannot make a movie anymore in the United States. I mean, if you don't have at least a third of your budget for publicity. So, but anyhow, Total Recall was Arnold. It was Arnold's invention, nearly, to make this movie. He was looking for that script of Total Recall already for many years, and it was in the hands of Dino De Laurentiis, who was going to do it a year earlier with Bruce Beresford as a director. And then he went bankrupt. And Arnold wanted to do that part, but Dino, who had done Conan with Arnold, felt that Arnold was the wrong choice, and he refused to take Arnold. So then, when the Laurentiis went bankrupt, Arnold pushed a friend of ours, Mario Casar, who was a producer, to buy the rights of this script. And then Arnold, after that, having seen RoboCop, asked me if I want to do this movie. So it was really, the star was set, the script was set, and then the director could come in. So it's not like what you might think, that it is the director who started this project, developed this project, and then chose his actor, and etc. It was really the other way around. Everything was already set, and it was that easy. They sent me the script in the morning. Mario Casar sent me that script. Said, "Can you read it today? If so, and if you like it, come to a dinner that we have. Arnold is there, and let's see let's see what you think." So I went there, I read the script. I thought that scene with Dr. Edgemar that you didn't see here was a great scene. And in fact, when you're never in that scene where you start to realize that everything you have seen might not be true. That is that at that time was also quite innovative. And so I went to that dinner, and then it was like, okay, do you like the script? Yes. Do you like Arnold? Yes. Okay, let's do the movie. Tomorrow you start. I mean, it's completely gone. That attitude is completely gone in Hollywood, you know. So it was really one dinner, shake hands, and start the next morning. It's amazing that it existed that way, that it was possible, yeah.
How about Sharon Stone? Was she on board already then, or did you cast her yourself?
No, she came in the first, we started auditions. Arnold had, of course, had to be accepting basically what I came up with. He was really the power in the whole movie, you know. If Arnold wouldn't have liked the cast, then he would have said no, and you have to change it. But I met Sharon by coincidence the first day of casting, and I did a scene with her. And I thought she was good, and I proposed this, I videotaped it, I gave it to Arnold that night, and he said it's great, and it went very easy. So she was cast within a day. And then basically I had to work with her, yeah, which was a bit more complicated. But not as it is as complicated as it has become later. But
well, I mean, we have been talking with you about which scenes we'd like to show and so on, and you suggested this scene because it basically shows a side of Sharon Stone that made you decide a couple of other things in your career later on.
Yeah, clear. I mean, that scene, what you just saw, that last moment when she basically wants to kill the other girl, Melina, and then cannot do it because Arnold had a gun, and she's this kind of violent face she has then suddenly going into absolute charm, like, honey. That stayed with me as something so sensational. You can see it in her eyes happening, you know. It is Sharon Stone, you know. I mean, it has a lot to do with herself. And but anyhow, she did it also as an actress, and so when we started to cast Basic Instinct, by coincidence, she came in because we had to do an airplane version of Total Recall, and we had to change some lines with shit or God or fuck or whatever that had to be taken out and replaced by some other words, and in the plane you cannot hear these words apparently, and so. And she came in to loop a couple of these lines that we had to redo. And then I thought, so interesting, it happened in a second, basically. I saw her, she said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to do Basic Instinct. Oh, she said, oh yeah, I know that script, I believe, that's a good script. And at that moment, I thought, this is really really what nobody will accept. But suppose that I present this woman that was basically seen as a C actress, you know. If I present her as Catherine Tremel. And then it took me 3-4 months to convince Mario Casar, especially Michael Douglas, who wanted Michelle Pfeiffer or whatever star at the moment. He felt that the situation was so provocative of the film, with the nudity and the sex and the this, that he felt that to take that burden on his star shoulders, and he was a star, of course, was risky. And so he wanted Michelle or one of the other females, leading females of that time, that would also be a star. And Sharon was, of course, a C actress, as I said, you know, and considered as such. And it took an enormous amount of time to convince the studio, TriStar, Sony, in fact, Carolco, who was Mario Casar's company, and Michael Douglas, to take Sharon. It was after I had been forced to see 15, 20 other actresses that all backed off when they well, because they also, there was a lot of description of what happened sexually in the script. Joe Esterhaus wrote it, but he was not implicit, he was very explicit. So it was clear what the script meant, but all these actresses, of course, said, well, you're not going to shoot it that way. And then I said, yes, it will be worse. And so they... And they all disappeared. They all refused. And the only person that has said, when I talked to her, I said, well, you know, I'm trying to get you into that part. And she said, okay. I said, but you have to make a deal with me. You have to do everything I say. And you know what is involved, yeah? Because you knew that. And she said, it's okay. And we shook hands. And then at a certain moment, when there was nobody left anymore, then everybody capitulated. And then I could get her. It took forever, 3 months. To convince them to do this, which was really, for all the people involved, also Michael, of course, was really dangerous, you know. If I would have been wrong, then it would have been disaster, clearly. But, I mean, I based it on these couple of seconds, when she changes from complete violence into ultimate charm. In a split second like that. And I thought that is Catherine Tremel. That is basically the main character of Basic Instinct.
Great. Let's have a look at Catherine Tremel being picked up by Michael Douglas at her home and being driven to the precinct. I have the feeling this is one of the films where people are glued to the screen and can't stop watching.
You prevented them to see this, huh?
Yeah. Coming back to well, you just explained about how you convinced everybody basically involved to cast Sharon Stone again. Talking about other collaborations, this became a famous film. I mean, this is an example of how you turned this film, even though the whole crew and many things were said, you made this film. And it's one of the classics, I think, of film history. What I think, when I watch this scene, I know that you worked with Jan de Bont again on this film.
This was the last time that I worked with Jan de Bont, who had done a lot of my Dutch movies, like Turkish Delight and Soldier of Orange or whatever. He did most of my Dutch movies, but then at a certain moment he immigrated to the United States and he worked on this, on several movies. And in the beginning I couldn't work with him anymore because Robocop, neither Total Recall were DGA movies, so he could really not do that legally. And here again he was available, and I thought that would be more, let's say, a Jan de Bont movie than a Joost Vulcano movie. And so we work together again. I mean, this is one of the movies where by coincidence, perhaps you have to say, of course you have something to do with that, but there is also a lot of things that have to go your way by coincidence, you know, where everything falls in place, the actors and the DP and the music. I mean, this is music by Jerry Goldsmith with one of his most beautiful scores. And my cooperation with Gary was already in Total Recall, but here it took us forever to find the melody, or at least the thematic material that is, let's say, it's mostly a string orchestra. And ultimately, we based it as an idea on a piece of work, a composition by Igor Stravinsky, which is called Apollon Musazet, which is something that is only for string orchestra. And we were playing that and say that is more or less the atmosphere, not of course the mysteriousness is there too, but in a different way. But we all felt it had to be something like that, but then as a film composition, clearly. With Igor Stravinsky, you don't need the movie anymore. You can listen, it's good enough to listen to itself.
About the scene, with, I mean, especially I think the car scene, where you play with the light, and can you tell something about how you work with Jan de Bont on creating this atmosphere and them talking about the suspension of disbelief?
Well, I mean, my conversation, I know Jan forever, yeah? So he grew up with me nearly in Holland. So we are not discussing these things ad nauseum, you know, we just have, in fact, what we did to inspire ourselves would be looking at paintings by Hockney. That's really was our main inspiration source, especially all the Hockney paintings that he did when he was doing all these swimming pools in California. I don't know if you know them. He's a beautiful artist, in fact. I think there's an exposition in Köln here at the moment. But, and that was really what we want, this kind of blue. So it is a film noir, of course, this is a film noir. But we decided not to do that with the heavy shadows that you see in film noir, isn't it? When you see all the silhouettes of the windows on the walls and like bars on the walls. And we decided to make that completely in a different way as a new, let's say, a renewal of film noir. And use a lot of the blues and the whites and all that stuff. And I think then after that, we didn't talk too much anymore. Yeah, we talked about the point of view, I mean, where the camera would be and all that, and how to, what lens and whatever, but we would not be talking style anymore. That was kind of, he started, the style was exactly what I thought it should be, and then we never discussed that anymore. And for example, in a scene like this, with the light, basically, that she says, well, it's about a detective, and he falls for the wrong woman, she says, isn't it, about her book, and then the light from then the sunlight comes over our face, and just before she says she kills him, yeah. And when we were shooting that scene, we realized that because of the curve of the road, basically that was along the ocean there, we saw that at a certain moment, by coincidence, the light would fall into the car, yeah, for a moment. So then we did it 6-7 times till we found out at what point we had to start the scene, so that at the moment that she would say he falls for the wrong woman, that the light would strike her. So that's how it was done, you know. It's no digital stuff. It is really trying. Okay, we know we should start a bit further away, then, and etc. And after 4 or 5 tryouts, basically, then we got it at the right time. So I mean, but it's something you see on the set. It happens, and then you think, okay, use it, you know. So I think what happens on the set. Most of the, of course, you have to foresee the scene. You have to have the scene in your head in some way. But often there are things that are, let's say, given to you by the actors, by this, by that, or by, in this case, by nature, that you, if you are attentive, that you can use.
Coming to the precinct, when the group enters the room, moving a bit to production design as well, and how rooms and spaces look in the film, I think it's a great example actually of how you made it quite a different atmosphere in the normal precinct scenes.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was, like I mean, I didn't do that, Jan de Bont did that. He proposed to make this kind of cave or cellar kind of feeling with the light and all that stuff. He came to me. I didn't come to here. I thought it would be a normal room. And he said, it's so boring. And Jan is like that. So he said, this is boring, that's boring. We should do something new. And I thought, yeah, okay, that may make it better. And he talked mostly to the production designer for that scene. Then they gave me the drawings and all that stuff, and I approved. But again, you know, you have to listen to the people you work with, you know, because they sometimes have newer ideas, better ideas, different ideas that might be, sometimes they are okay, but not better than what you had, and I wouldn't do it. But at the moment you hear something, you think, oh, this is better. I think you have to change your mind and let everything behind what you have thought before. And that happens in that, yeah, so it's really, I'm not to credit for this at all.
Let's go to Starship Troopers, which features actually a lot of other great production design, a whole imaginary world that you built there. Long film, strong scene. We're going to watch a scene in which there's an attack on the compound. Let's roll the clip of Starship Troopers and then talk a bit about how you worked on that. This film was made in 1997. Can you say something about how you work with the production design and created this whole new world? I mean, in RoboCop, in Total Recall, there is actually quite some... it has this sci-fi look, which is linked to reality. This is even more sci-fi, I think. But the strong things about your films are always very deeply and strongly connected to human stories in these films. Can you say something about how you work with the production designer to create this?
Well, I like it to be as realistic as possible, although it's science fiction, so I pay a lot of attention to the details and the light and whatever. I mean, in fact, these neither Total Recall or RoboCop or Starship Troopers could have been done without the help of two extremely talented visual effects operators, or creators, I should say, which is Robotine, who did the RoboCop costume and everything, and Phil Tippett, who did Ed 209 in RoboCop, the big robot, and we did all the animals here. And he's one of the top digital artists of the United States, I think, and he worked on 2 of my movies, and a lot of these things you see with the animals, I mean, you have to, of course, prepare your own shot, which is the actors, and on the foreground or in the background, you have to direct all that. Of course, when you're shooting the scene, there's nothing there, isn't it? All these animals are not there. And it's me there, yelling and screaming as if I'm an animal. I do that. And Phil Tippett did the same. And then we hold poles so that they know that they should not look at my eyes, but they should look high because the animals are bigger. So you walk with poles and you do like that to convince the actors that there is something there. But in fact, it's all void. There's nothing to see for them than me and Phil. And so they have to use their imagination. But if you do that very well, and then you get an artist like Phil Tippett, and not only an artist, also a technician, of course, but this a lot of that is completely digital, you know, even the poles of that hold the compound, the metal structures and all that is all digital. And then he will fill in what was not there in the most innovative, original, and extremely convincing way, you know. I think even when I look at that movie, it looks like these animals were there, you know, and I think they did a great job, you know. It's so don't at these big movies, of course, you work with hundreds of people, you know, and without then all these departments have their own, let's say, group of people, and sometimes like. Here, in this case, there are hundreds of animators and painters and do the composite of the images. And so you make this movie more like building the Notre Dame, you know? It's really a common situation. Yes, you supervise it. Yes, you're in some way the captain of the ship. But it is also what you wouldn't really call this anonymous 300, 400, 500 people that do the real work, you know, and without them you wouldn't be able to do anything of this. So, and it's interesting, of course, this music, the music you hear here, is of Basil Polidouris, as was the music of Robocop and Total Recall, and Basic Instinct is Jerry Goldsmith. And in the United States, I worked always with only two composers, Basil and Jerry. Both are by now dead. They died a couple of years ago. They were fantastic people to work with. You could sit, I mean, it was a pleasure to go and listen to themes and melodies and instrumentations as they can do now, isn't it? They can play you the whole orchestra on the synthesizer, kind of. And if you work with, I mean, I think film is really depending on at least 10, 15 extremely talented people. I mean, included the actors then, of course, you know. And if you don't have them, then it's, to do it on your own, I feel, is extremely difficult.
I think there's quite some questions from the audience as well. I think we should start maybe taking some questions from the audience. We have one clip to follow later on. Let me see, we have 3 floors. Please raise your hand. And we have mics in the room as well, so first come, first serve. Here in the middle. But we need a mic, because otherwise we can't hear you. Maybe you can briefly say where you're from, because we have people from 96 countries here probably, so just to hear a little bit where you're from. Works.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm from Denmark. My name is Karen, I'm a director. You talk about how you were influenced by painting and by music. I was curious, with your background in mathematics, if that in any way influenced the way that you think about film, also now with the digital medium that's shaped by mathematics.
Well, not in an immediate way, but I would nearly say that every education you get, and especially when it's, but it could be otherwise too, you know, it can also be for 5 years a taxi driver in New York. I think you pick up a lot too, you know, in a different way. But if you do mathematics, then you get a good feeling for structure, of course, because all mathematical theories are just structures based on a couple of assumptions, and then you build the whole structure on these assumptions, isn't it? So I think that will help you to look at the movie in a structured way and see what bridges you are building and what over. But when I'm shooting a movie, I'm not aware of the fact that I'm a mathematician anymore at all, you know. I have already a hard time to solve the problems of my daughters at high school, you know. So.
We also have questions on the first balcony. Is there a mic up there as well? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Tessa. I'm from Berlin. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you very much. It's really great, Paul. I'm up here at the balcony, first row. Good Hi. My question is, do you visualize your movies, your films, before you start working? Do you have more a technical approach, or is it imagination, or is it both?
Mostly, especially with special effect movies, you have to storyboard them completely, because it's a big battle with a budget battle, how far you can go, and on these, so I make storyboards myself. Then I give them, but I sketch them kind of. Then I give them to a storyboard artist, and they make them beautiful and more comprehensible and whatever. But then they go to the budget department of the special effect house, and then they are going to put a number. How much is that shot costing? And then you have to be very careful that everything that is important for that shot is on the painting, or what is not a painting, is how you call that, sketch, yeah. And because if you come later and say, yeah, of course there are, but around the corner there are some other animals clearly in it. Well, say that's okay, that is another 50,000. So you have this special effects where, I mean, you are forced to be extremely precise with your pre-production drawings. And that forces you a little bit into a situation where you have to start thinking, shall I move the camera, yes or no? And then they say, well, you can make so many shots with, when the camera does not move. You can have so many shots where the camera pans, and then less shots if the camera pans and tilts. And you get a really high budget for that shot if you move the camera in 3 dimensions. So when you have to do shots, over-shoulder shots with a Steadicam, running behind people, with animals in the shot, digital animals, that is the most expensive, you know, but because the camera is erratic, of course, with a Steadicam. Still, it does a little bit like that, and they have to track all that to get the animals in. Otherwise, the animals do that too, you know. So you have to be very precise there. So there is a certain rigidity, a certain kind of coldness gets into the thing because it's so technical and it is so budget, financial, how do I call that? Dependent. Now, when you do a more normal movie, say like Basic Instinct, then I mostly make sketches only of the love scenes. Not because I like that, which is true too, but I think I want to be sure that the actors and actresses know exactly what they're going to shoot. What part of the body, under which angle, if they have to, let's say, kiss their nipples or vagina or whatever. I paint, I draw it, it's nicely done by somebody else, I give it to the actors, we discuss it beforehand, and I basically choreograph a sex scene, like there are a couple of them in Basic Instinct. I choreograph it nearly like an action scene. So I like a choreography, like for ballet, yeah? That everybody, every actor knows exactly when he goes into the scene, that it's not, okay guys, make it hot, you know? That is really not the way to get the best results. Because then everybody's embarrassed and nobody knows what to do. And it's anyhow difficult for actors because if you do sex scenes, the actors have to be, there's not so much information they generally have about a man, about other men, how to behave, or women, how other women behave. You know, the information is a little bit limited to what you do yourself. So you give yourself away in the way you do your sex. And so they have to be protected, that there is no embarrassment and they don't feel the wrong things, and that they don't have the feeling that the whole crew is looking around. And normally you reduce the set to, let's say, 10, maximum 10 people to shoot it, you know, prepare it, then everybody goes off the set, then the actors come in. So sex scenes I storyboard too, and that kind of normal scenes I do, that's really imagination. I see the scene when when somebody tells me a story, then normally I see this, as they are telling, I see it, you know. It's a kind of a thing that I have, and hopefully every director has that you immediately see the scene and this and that, and I can, in my head, rotate where the camera should be. You can look from above, from below, whatever. I mean, it's like a computer can do that, isn't it, nowadays? They can do all these moves and then look at from here and there and such and so. I mean, I can do that in my brain too, and so then I sketch that out, and if it's important, I ask a storyboard artist to make it, let's say, beautiful, or if we are all among people we know, then I can do it with my, for example, in the last movie that I did was Black Book, which is partially shot here in Berlin. Then I did my storyboards myself because it was a kind of an intimate situation, and what I did was good enough for the actors to understand. But it's really fantasy, my fantasy inspired by the words of the screenplay writer. It's not the basic, and sometimes I see beyond and I see a little bit further, and sometimes I change it a little bit, because when you see it in your mind, you can see if it's too fast or too slow, and then you think, oh God, that is slow in the script, you know? We have to make that clear that it keeps moving. That brings you, of course, to the main, let's say, situation where you have been announcing, but we never talked about, entertainment. And I think entertainment, if you say, well, you're very, you made some entertaining movies and you do that very well, then I told you and I emailed you, but I think you can only entertain when you like it yourself. I don't do things that I think this is what the public will like. I hope that what I think is interesting, what I think is entertaining, that I have not a very different taste of the audience, that they will like it too. But I think you have to go from yourself, I feel. You have to do what you like to see yourself. And that is, of course, sometimes wrong, you know, and then you make a movie that doesn't work. But that's the risk. But I mean, American studios now are very much in calculations, you know. They give points for the actors, this and that, about the career of the director, career of the actor. They all give it in points, and then they get a number. And if the number is too low, they don't do the movie. But the audacity to do something like Lawrence of Arabia, that's gone, you know. There's nobody that will do Lawrence of Arabia anymore. Nobody will dare to do that. They will not give you the money. A big exception being perhaps the Life of Pi, which was, let's say, not a given. I mean, the book was very, well, I mean, everybody knew the book, in fact, I mean, over the world, isn't it? But still, that was a very audacious experiment and went okay, yeah. Sorry.
Let's move on. We're gonna come back to the question of entertainment, but you're absolutely right. We have a question here in the front. Do you have a mic here?
My name is Ksenia. I'm from Los Angeles. So when you read the script, how do you decide that I'm going to do this? What is it that you look for that makes you like it or not like it? Like with the point of decision?
Well, I also give it to my wife. And often to my daughters. If I like it, I'll check it out a little bit. I'm not looking for something. I mean, I did for example, I did RoboCop because in the movie there is a moment that he goes, RoboCop has become RoboCop, and Murphy is gone, this is RoboCop now, but then he finds out that he had a house and that there was somebody else called Murphy and that was really him too, yeah? So he goes to his house, and in his house, these memories of his wife and his child come back, yeah? So, and I felt that was like a Lost Paradise situation. And I did the movie because of that. When I read that, I identified with that. It meant something to me. Lost Paradise, I mean, it's a well-known book, of course, but it's also something that we know in some way that at least is meaningful to me. And I thought this Lost Paradise, together with the theme of death and resurrection, of course, isn't it? I mean, of course, there are Jesus metaphors. He walks over the water in RoboCop later and whatever. He says, but then I always say this is the American Jesus because he doesn't arrest anymore; he kills. Well, it is drone stuff, you know. And so it's really sometimes one thing, the scene with Dr. Edgemeier, that you saw a part of that, when he comes into that room and he says, well, you think you're standing here, but in fact you're sitting in the chair at the recall office, and you are basically we can't get you out of the dream that we sold you. When I read that, then I thought, this is so interesting. That one moment, that was the decision, then immediately after that scene, was halfway the movie, I called the producer and I said, I'm going to do that, because that was such an interesting idea, and so, perhaps not even a bit European idea perhaps, but to dare to do that, and to say, okay, everything you saw, this is all nonsense, it's really a dream. And then immediately after that, proving, between quotes, proving that that it might be true anyhow. Because then, because he announces that Edgemeier, he said, the walls of reality will fall apart, and you will be the savior of the world, you know. But it's all your dream, and at the end, we can't get you out. We will lobotomize you, so you can make your choice now. and then he chooses to kill the guy. So then the whole stories, then everything what happens after that is what he just told you, but you think is real. And I thought this going back to between reality and dream and thinking, really this was not happening. And then thinking, oh, it is happening. And at the end thinking, well, perhaps it didn't happen anyhow. And now it's lobotomized, because that's why I faded to white at the end of the movie. Not to black, fade to white, like the brain is erased.
We have more questions here. I think in the front, please.
Lucy, Russia, where I can send the script in the morning and where I can invite you in the evening for dinner.
Well, you can
We're talking business here now.
Well, a script you can certainly depose at the Hyatt Hotel for room 638.
Do you have email?
I have an email too. I can give that to you when we finish this.
Okay, let's move on. Maybe we have a question. I'm coming to. We have a question here, please. The guy here in the middle with the black.
Hello, I'm Felix. I'm from Luxembourg. I'm a big fan of your movies, and I have a question because what struck me, I watched all your making-ofs, and what struck me was how you work with your actors, and because when I watched the making-of Hollow Man, you acted basically the scene for them, and they just stood by and watched you, and you had such a high energy level, which was inspiring apparently for the whole set. Could you just talk a little bit how you deal with actors?
Well, I have to be very careful with that stuff, because then I'm not an actor at all. So what I'm doing when I'm presenting the scene or parts of the scene, or say you have to do this or that or certain, so it's more like presenting something than real acting, you know. And really good actors sometimes, like the actress of Black Book, Carice van Houten, when I would do that, she would look at me very seriously and say, well, Paul, I don't think I really understood. Could you do it again? Then you know that you shouldn't do it. But, I mean, it's more, I mean, I saw a documentary about Roman Polanski when he was working with Mia Farrow. And before he tells you that he leaves the actors completely on their own. They really have to do it their way. And he tells, and then you see him on the set with Mia Farrow. And she sits like this, something like that. And he passes by talking about the scene, and she sits like this. And he takes her hand and puts it like that. And later you see him with an actor that he picks, the actor has to, and he's not satisfied by the way he walks. He takes the actor and he walks with the actor behind him. And that is when you think that you leave the actors alone, yeah?
Great, let's move on to the next question, maybe somewhere upstairs. I have really hard time to see people up there, but scream if you're on the second balcony. I hear none. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Enrique. I'm from Panama. I'm a big fan, and actually, RoboCop was one of my favorite movies when I was a little kid, because it was about a robot shooting people and violence and all that stuff. That's pretty exciting when you're a kid, but.
Oh, not anymore.
Yeah, no, but it's still, I guess. But as I grew up, I watched it again when I was older. And what I really like about the movie is like the portrayal of the society that surrounds the story. In this case, I think it was Detroit, Michigan, right?
It was, yeah. We shot it in Dallas and Pittsburgh, but it was supposed to be Detroit, yes.
Yeah, and earlier you mentioned about this decision to cut into these news reels and commercials, and I think that's one of the things that makes it. This society pretty much interesting and what takes place in the movie. But I also think my question is, do you think you were making like a social statement about the society you were getting into at that moment, or was that something already in the script, or do you think an American director would have portrayed that society differently?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of course, it was in the script. clearly indicated there was this kind of like the prisons being privatized and all that kind of stuff that's happening now anyhow. That was there, but it also unconsciously, I mean, not so much that I really wanted to do that, but it also shows in the film my amazement about American society. My amazement, for example, to have these people, the way anchor people at that time behaved already in the United States, you know, saying, okay, I hope it will go well, and stuff like, when there's one of these cops that is dying or not dying, and the guy says, okay, well, and we'll stay alive or something. But that was really my amazement looking at American television. That was so completely entertainment and different from Dutch television that is completely not seen at that time. It has changed. Everybody is Americanized now. You know, this cultural imperialism worked very well. And so, for the Americans. So I was amazed, and I think I expressed that, but not by purpose. It went into the scenes because I felt that it was strange, and I tried to give that feeling of strangeness. So, and I think when I made a more definite attempt to criticize or to be critical about society or about this, let's say, utopia of Starship Troopers, then I really made an attempt to have uniforms and shots that are really taken from Riefenstahl's movie, Triumph of the Will, yeah. Because I want to show that their utopia was also a fascist utopia.
We have time for 2 more questions. There, here in the corner.
Hello? I don't know, wait. Hello, I'm here.
There, yeah.
Emanuel Zărescu from Romania. I have 2 questions. One question. In your opinion, what do you think changed in Hollywood in the last years? Because we grew up with your movies and a lot of good science fiction movies and action movies, and nowadays all the movies are I don't know, special effects and no story. And what do you think it's the blame for this change? And one example, it was Total Recall, your Total Recall, that it was one of the best science fiction that I have seen in years, and the last one, the remake, was total crap. So
I agree, yeah, fully agree.
You mentioned before that also remaking Starship Troopers. I don't know why, because we don't need remakes. So what's your opinion about that?
Well, I think that has a lot to do with, might have to do with fear. I mean, and the studios becoming more and more important, the executives and the lawyers and the this and the that, everything is calculated, and they really are thinking, can we make money? It's greed that reigns, you know. If you see, this is already now called the year of the sequels. If you see, there are 40, 50 sequels, I think, coming out this year in the United States. And if you make a sequel or a remake or this or that or a prequel sequel, it's all based on the fact that something worked okay, or well, I would say. And it worked well, said, let's do it again. Instead of thinking, let's do something different. Let's try. But that audacity is very difficult to find. As I say, The Life of Pi is one of the few examples where people really took risks. And, but that's pretty unique. And it's because it's a very famous and successful director, Ang Lee. So basically, he could get that done. But I think in general, it has become very difficult to come up with original ideas. And in all honesty, all the movies I made in Europe, included the last one, Black Book, were my, or were the ideas of me, or of my scriptwriter, or a combination. And so I did always movies that I wanted to do, really personally. In the United States, I have only been able to make movies that they wanted me to do. No, I have tried to make the best out of that, you know, and give it a personal touch and make it mine. But everything that I tried personally to do, projects that I really wanted to do in the United States, I never got it. It was never done. I couldn't get it done.
Is it also one of the reasons why you returned to Europe, making Black Book here in Europe?
Yeah, clear. Yeah, because what I could do in Hollywood at that time didn't interest me anymore. And so you get old, you want other things in life, you know, go closer to death, and that makes a lot of difference, unfortunately. But I couldn't find my way. I couldn't find a script that I liked. And if it was a script that I liked, there's a great script that was written, and it's in the hands of Bill Mechanic, who's the ex-head of Fox. And we cannot finance it because it's a film noir, and the protagonist dies. So they didn't want to do it, you know. I think it's too negative. I mean, while it was a film noir in the 30s and 40s, and the hero dies, Sunset Boulevard, he dies, you know. I mean, that was not, people could still accept that. Now the studios think that people cannot accept that anymore, that it has to be entertaining and that there should not be any shadow of doubt around. And the shadow of doubt is over all of us, but we seem to deny that. And this is denied there. You might realize that later when you're a bit older, that there is a shadow of death.
Well, you referred already quite sometimes to entertainment. At least your opinion about how to do that, and I think for many people quite inspiring to do that. I mean, we have the theme "Some Like It Hot" this year as one of the inspirations as well, Billy Wilder's film. You referred already to people who influence you. You mentioned Stravinsky, you mentioned Mondrian, many other painters, Hockney.
And many directors like Hitchcock, of course. I mean, Hitchcock is one of my favorite directors, but David Lean is, and there are many, 3 or 4 others, Kurosawa. There are many directors that I studied very well, you know. I studied all the movies of Hitchcock. I couldn't have done Basic Instinct without looking at other movies, the movies of Hitchcock, you know. There's a lot of, there's a lot of similarities, of course, between Basic Instinct and Vertigo, clearly.
I mean, you don't only make films, but you also write columns in a Dutch newspaper, and these columns have been published. It's a Dutch book, so not for many people readable. I really hope it's going to be translated in English, because it's a fantastic book. It's basically walking through film history with you talking about classical films, how they inspired you, what went wrong, what went well. Some Like It Hot is actually one of these films, and Billy Wilder's film is a film that sort of inspired you, at least. You have a lot of respect for Billy Wilder. Let's have a look at one scene of Some Like It Hot, also featuring Marilyn Monroe, and then we'll talk at the end of the session a little bit more about that. Let's roll a clip of Some Like It Hot, 1959, Billy Wilder. Paul, classical film is also screening this week in the Berlinale in the retrospective program. Films influenced by the Weimar Republic. Why is this such a good film? I mean, it was a black and white film in a time that color was like what people wanted to see. It shows a couple of things that people would, if you would summarize it, they would never see a film like 2 men dressing up as women. Why is this such a good film?
I think it has a lot to do with the director and the 3 main actors, I think, and the casting in general is perfect, of course. But and I don't think this film would ever have been that successful if it had not, if Marilyn Monroe wouldn't have played that part, you know. And she's at that time and even later, she has been always underestimated as a comedian, a comedy actress, and I think she's. There is something completely radiant about her, and beautiful and naive, and then the 2 actors, Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, play around that in such a great way. And Billy Wilder has that. I mean, had a total grip on the situation in all the scenes. Basically, you feel that he knew exactly what he was doing. In fact, it was based on an old German. Film, you know, out of the 30s, about two men that put on women's clothes, and But the story basically that Billy Wilder added was the criminal story, isn't it? That they are witness in the beginning of a murder or massacre, and then the bad guys are after them because they have seen it, isn't it? And so they put on these women clothes so you're not so visible. Anyhow, and also the dialogue is very precise and clever and funny. It is a long-time collaborator of Billy Wilder and Diamond. And I think they did it in black and white because Billy Wilder felt that if you would do it in color at that time at least, that the travesty situation with the men being women would be too harsh, you know, that he was afraid that it would be not as believable as a black and white version with makeup and all of that stuff. And although Marilyn Monroe was very angry in the beginning because she was accustomed to shooting color, he convinced her that it should be black and white. So that was an artistic decision to make the two male actors look better as women. Further, that was the only, it was not that he wanted to be artistic or something, he just thought that it would hurt him to do it in color. And he probably was right, you know. It's also Billy Wilder is such an interesting director because he didn't stick to one genre, you know. He did many different things, film noir, comedy, even about concentration camps or whatever in Germany. So he didn't, he was not afraid, like we are a bit in the United States now, to do something that was not a given success. He did this movie, Ace, what's called with Kirk Douglas, Ace in the whatever, and that didn't work, and others didn't work, you know, but he was always trying to do something he had not done before. And I think that I still hope and believe that that's really what has motivated me not to do a sequel, is that I have done that, and I'm sure that if I do it again, it will never be as good. And because it's boring to do something you have already done and then do it again to get at least so that you can make half of the money or something. It's only rare that the sequel is really good. I mean, I think the best example is Star Wars 1 and Star Wars 2, I think. And even with The Godfather, but a lot of people think that, I feel that Godfather 1 is superior than to 2. But, so Billy Wilder was not afraid to do the unknown. And I feel that's very, let's say, existential. I feel that you should jump into the unknown. You know, it's Heidegger, in fact.
Great.
And I've tried to do that you are, even going to the United States was jumping into the unknown. And I feel that you have to be artistically convincing, you have to face the unknown instead of going for what you had already and building on that all the time and extending a little bit. I think you should be radically jumping into a new situation and not know exactly if you can handle it. But that is basically, that's the point, isn't it? That you are not sure that you can handle it. That you are afraid of the project. And then you battle with the project, but that inspires you. That makes you, a certain fear is very good for an artist, I think.
Sounds like a great end. Paul Verhoeven, talking about following your instincts, going with the flow.
Thank you.
Daring to try new things and taking big risks. That's a great start, jumping into the unknown, jumping into the campus week. Paul Verhoeven, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, too. Thank you. Thank you very much.